In this video, we're going to be learning how to make and align a reusable jig for the Glowforge. So let's open Illustrator and get started. Now for this example, I'm just creating some really simple ornaments, but this type of jig would work no matter what you're making. So pencils, keychains, anything that's going to work. Now in my file, I have a couple of simple things here. I just have a rectangle, I have a label that we're going to score, and I have my wells or my shapes. So let's start from the beginning and create a new file. Now the first thing you'll want to notice is that I've set my artboard to 20 inches by 12 inches. And that's important because by doing that, it's going to load in exactly the same place every time that we open the Glowforge. So I recommend always creating your files as 12-inch height and 20-inch width. And the rest of it's not super important, just one artboard, 12 by 20. All right, so let's create, and now we have a new file. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to my shape tool. I'm going to click and open the ellipse tool, and then I'm going to click on the artboard and set my size. So I already know based on measuring my circles that they are, I believe, 2.91 inches. So you can adjust this to be a little larger if you need to, and you'll see me do that in a moment. But in general, I'm just going to get it really close to the original size. So I found something around 2.92 is going to be perfect. Now you'll see up here, I can actually just change the size right here. I have my proportions linked, and I think I changed it to 2.96. That's a little bit big. You really want your wells to be just perfect for fitting the object, but not too tight. I'm then going to click Option and drag to copy them, and I'm just going to arrange them in just this simple pattern. Now here I'm going to get rid of the fill, because occasionally if you leave the fill, it's going to try and engrave the image, and you just don't want it to be guessing at your settings. So I just always remove the fill. Sometimes white fills cause a problem. Generally not a huge deal, but just so that we have them cleared out. And something to note is when you place this stuff on your artboard, wherever it is, that's where it's going to load in the Glowforge. So I've slightly centered it. I've gone back and grabbed my rectangle tool, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle. Now at this stage, a lot of times I will go back up to that transform panel and make it a perfect size. Here instead, I'm just going to round the corners. I'm not super worried about the size here. So just a simple rectangle, and the reason is we want to cut this out so that we will have a reusable shape. I'm going to move my circles over, and then I'm going to change my stroke color. And the reason I'm going to do that is it will allow me to set it as a different function, because we're not always going to want to cut out the shape, but we want to have that as a separate item in the Glowforge. And the rounded corners don't do anything. I just like to have rounded corners. It's just something I chose to do because it's a little fun. But in this blank area at the bottom, I now want to add some text that I can score so that I can remember what this jig was used for in the future. And I don't want to use the text tool. I actually want to use a script. And I have a separate post about this, but I'm going to go to Other Scripts, and I'm going to find this monoline script. And what that's going to do is create text that is in single lines so I can score it and I don't have to engrave it. So once I run that script, it's going to give me the option to type it in. I'm just going to type in some random information, so Panthera Press and ornaments 2021. And from there, I'm just going to click OK, and it's going to create this nice monoline script. And as I scale this up, if I zoom in, you can see that this is actually made of single strokes. So this is not going to engrave, it's going to score, and it's going to be much faster. I'm going to change that to its own color and move it into place. And from here, I'm just going to get everything arranged the way I want it to look. Set that down there, and we're pretty much good to go. So our basics of our jig is now built. If you want to use the Pathfinder tool, some other things to align it, I have other videos that talk about that tool. This is going to work for demonstration purposes. And now I need to pick some artwork to go in it. So I'm going to save this jig as it is and then start adding the artwork. So I always save as a PDF. I find they tend to load correctly and always keep their sizing, where SVGs can sometimes be a little funny. So I always choose PDF. And now I'm going to open a different file. And this file is from FreePick and includes just a bunch of different mandala artwork. Now, when I open this, something to note is that this stuff is free for personal use only. You really need to read the licensing for this when you go to download this stuff. I'm just doing a demonstration. I'm not planning on selling these, so it's fine for what I'm doing. But unless you have a professional account with them and are paying for that, this stuff is not free for selling. It's only free for personal use. So make sure you read those licensing agreements and that you're doing that correctly. For now, I'm just going to copy these 3 shapes out. We're just doing a demo, so these will work perfect. I'm going to paste them in, and while they're grouped, I'm going to scale them up till they're a reasonable size, and then move them into place. And normally I would engrave these, but it's going to be a lot faster to score, so that's what we're going to be doing for this. I'm just going to change their color, make sure that they look correctly aligned, and once again, you can use the Pathfinder for that, but for now, I mean, I kind of get the idea this will work for what we're doing. So at this stage, your jig is pretty much finished. You could create multiple layers and drop in additional artwork, but we're going to be coming back and doing that later, so I'm not going to show that at the moment. At this stage, I would then save this as. You can see both of my files are pretty much the same here, and then we're going to be ready to go into the Glowforge interface very shortly. Alright, so once we have all of our artwork done, everything's colored correctly, we can open our browser. I'm going to swap from my free pick tab, which is where I downloaded the artwork, and I'm going to go to the Glowforge interface. I've already placed my piece of cardboard in my Glowforge and pinned it into place, and we are ready to actually upload our artwork. So to do that, I'm going to go to the plus at the top, and then I'm going to click upload, and I'm going to go navigate to that PDF document. Now, while I'm hunting for it, as you can see, my desktop is a complete mess, and then it wasn't even in the desktop, it was in the downloads folder, so you can just watch me fiddle around with this for a moment. But the goal here is, one thing I mention later that I want to mention now is wherever you place your item in Illustrator, as long as your artboard's 12 by 20, it's going to appear in that exact same spot. So you can see it's a little to the left here, it's a little bit over. I'm going to resave it to the desktop so I can find this item. Watch how this uploads into the Glowforge interface once I select it. So here we go, we found it. We're going to watch it upload, and it's going to be the exact scale, size, and placement as the Illustrator document. So this makes it really easy because you will be able to like upload things over and over again and just change your artwork without having to realign everything. So here we go, we can see it. Now from here, normally you wouldn't want to move it if you're going to be uploading your artwork over and over again. For this, I'm only cutting one reusable jig, and I'm going to show you how to align it afterwards, so I actually just moved the artwork really quickly to get it to fit on the cardboard. And from here, we are going to set our focus height and our settings, so we're ready for that next step. Now, as you can see, because I colored everything with different strokes, you can see it appears as different options on the left-hand side here. So we have our circles, our box, our text, and our artwork. Let's go to our circles and select our cardboard setting. I'm going to take my focus height here, which is 0.11. I've already measured that in the past, and I'm going to set that as my actual material height. I do not like to use the set focus, which is up under those dots. I think it's finicky. I prefer to just measure on my own, but you can use that if you choose. It mostly affects just the camera. It's not going to affect how it cuts. So here I'm going to select the cardboard setting again, and then we'll be ready to cut that out. And then finally, I'm going to select the score setting for my text. So you can see for that, I'm leaving the same cardboard focus height. The speed, I'm just going to set it at 500. And then I set the power at like 2 or 3. I'm going to redo that, and you're going to see 25 is the correct speed for that. So this is a test setting. I'm going to save it because I'm testing, and I always put test so I know when the setting is a good setting or if it's just a sample setting where I'm trying some things out. And then I'm going to ignore my artwork because I'm just cutting the jig at the moment and don't need the art yet. So let's quick cut over to the Glowforge and take a look at the cutting in process. So here we go. You can see I have a switch bot, so I just used my remote to get this started. I like to cut the inner parts of the design first and then the outer edge. And the reason for that is if you cut the outer edge, you can see the cardboard kind of falls through. Sometimes it will shift and then cause your stuff to be off by like really, really teeny fractions of an inch or a millimeter. It's really minor, but because I'm cutting a jig and I want perfect alignment, I'm definitely going to make sure I cut my outlines second. So as this goes around, and you can see this video is a little sped up, it's not quite this quick. But you'll notice there's no like really major charring. I don't have to mask this or anything. It's just a nice quick cut. And now it's going to score my text. You can see in this version, the text is a little bit light. When we come back to the Glowforge for a lighter step, we're gonna see I re-scored it at 25 power, and that was the right power for the score. So a little bit faint, but we can pop out our inner pieces. We don't need to move anything. We're just gonna drop in our 1/4" acrylic, and we're ready to go back to the design interface. Is refreshed, we can see our jig. It's really nicely aligned. I have great camera alignment, so we can definitely tell it looks good, but even if your stuff looks off, just don't move anything or change anything. It's good to go. So from here, I'm going to rescore my text at the 25 power because we later found out that was the correct setting. So let's move that up, and then we'll go to the artwork and set that to score as well. And scoring is just going to be a little bit quicker for the purpose of demonstration, so that's what I'm going to do. You'll also notice I have one piece that's masked, one that's only masked on one side, and one that's unmasked. I just wanted to kind of see how the score did with like creating smoke on the surface of the acrylic, so I just used some of these scrap pieces to see how they would turn out. So I'm going to turn off my circles and my outer border. We don't want to cut those again. I'm going to leave my scored text, and then I'm going to set my artwork to score. So as this is 1/4" acrylic, I'm just going to set my focus height to 0.25, even though I know it's actually a little bit less than that. I don't feel like going back to measure it real quick, and I forgot, so I'm just going to let it be 2.25. It'll work fine for the purpose of this. So we don't need to defocus our scores. We do like to defocus acrylic when we're doing engraving because it makes it a lot smoother. So something to keep in mind, if you're engraving, you might want to defocus that by like maybe like 0.1 or something around there. For a score, we're going to be perfectly fine with just the regular height. And from here, we're going to be able to just go back and click print, and then we'll swap back to the Glowforge, take a look at what our results are after we have scored our final designs. Okay, so here we have our finished pieces. You can see that that score at 25 power looks much better, so we'll stick with that for our final settings. And at this stage, what you could just do is pull these out and just keep swapping and continuing to either upload new artwork, remembering not to move anything in the file, or you could have it on multiple layers and turn each layer on and off, or we're gonna actually mess this whole thing up. So let's say you finished your project, you've removed all your items from here, you've taken everything out, and oh no, your jig has moved. Or you're coming back and that client just needs 3 more and you've already put everything away. Let's say you also made your jig out of like MDF or something a little pricier. Well, that's a problem. We now have to get everything realigned. So you can either just recut the jig from scratch, and if you're using something cheap like cardboard, a lot of times that's easiest. Or you can be very sneaky here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna set a piece of white copy paper into my machine. Now I would, if this was like very, very important to be really accurate, or my jig was really large, I might tape it down. I'm actually just gonna set it in here, and I'm gonna use my magnets. So I actually have some magnets here. I wanna make sure it's gonna be out of the way of the jig, so I'm only just gonna set one set of magnets at the top. And then it'll just keep it from blowing away and creating a fire hazard. So I'm gonna set one thing of magnets. Do be careful with magnets. They can affect your fan because your fan's running with a magnet. So if you're having problems, try to use pins or tape instead of magnets. So that's done. Now we're gonna go back to our computer and we're gonna take a look at that and how to get this jig, this reusable jig, realigned with this. Perfect, so we've refreshed our interface. We can see our piece of paper. We're not gonna move anything. And what we want to do is just reopen our artwork. So let's say you came back the next day, reopen it, leave everything where it's at, and then we just need to score our wells. And if you have like 50 of them, you don't need to score all of them, but you do want to either score the outside of the jig or the inner wells so that we can find our placement. So let's go over to our settings. Let's turn off our artwork and our score because we don't need that. So we're going to go in there and we're going to hit ignore. You can see I just adjusted and saved my setting. Now I'm going to turn it off here. Ignore. And now we can come back to our wells and we're going to set a nice low setting just to mark them on the surface of the paper. We don't want to cut them out. We just want to mark where they're located. So from there, we'll come in. I'm just going to grab my cardboard score settings again. I think they're going to be fine. I didn't really adjust the focus height here. I'm just going to take the power way down to like 2 or 3 is going to be perfect. We just need to mark it so that we can see it. I would generally want to like adjust the focus height here, but I'm going to leave it the same as the jig because we want it to kind of match where it would be located for the cardboard. So I'm not going to adjust it. I'm going to hit print and let's go check it out. Okay, so here's what we've ended up with. You can see my scores did not cut through the paper, and that's important. We don't want them blowing away. I've got my jig, and now all I have to do is very carefully, and to the best of my ability, line it up with all of those wells, and you can see I'm pretty close here, and then just pin or tape down this thing. And now you can actually leave the paper underneath. It's not really a huge deal. It's not going to cause like any major problems, especially because we're just engraving or scoring these objects. Now, if this was an issue of like we were going to be cutting, maybe I would try and slip it out, and I may try and do that just for the purpose of showing it. So I'm going to pin down these 2 bottom pieces really nicely. I'm sorry, I am not high tech, so I don't have a cameraman. I just have me. I'm going to remove the magnet, and then I'm going to very gently just slip this out from underneath, and that gives me the opportunity to pin down the top of my jig. So if it was taped, it might be a little harder to do, but this should get me pretty darn accurate with what I'm trying to do. So I'm actually just going to take these that we just did, and I'm going to pop them back in, and I'm just going to flip them and like switch where they were, because I think it'll be kind of cool to see the scored design in some different places. So let's flip those, and all done. Now we're ready to go back to the computer, do our final score, and hopefully that'll be it. All right, we're back in the interface. We've refreshed the camera, and you can see this looks like a pretty spot-on alignment. So it's definitely helpful to see because my camera is super accurate. If yours looks off in general, because you didn't move anything in the file, it's going to still be correct, even if it doesn't quite look right. If you're ever unsure, you can always grab those cardboard pieces, pop them back in, and retest just to make sure it's in the right spot. But here, I'm just going to adjust my settings for the artwork, turn off my wells, and then I'm going to be ready to do my other side of these designs. And again, this technique is going to work for just about any kind of jig you're trying to create. So it doesn't have to be these big circles. It can be unusually shaped items, things with like strange borders or whatever. As long as you can draw and measure that item in Illustrator and create the correct wells, you're going to be good to go. So let's get it engraved, let's send it to print, and look at our final project. Okay, so here we are, and it looks like everything worked out perfectly. I just thought it'd be kind of cool to see how these look double layered. They mostly look a little bit messy, but it's kind of a concept that you could play with and might look really cool to do like a score engrave on one side and then something different on the other. These ones I will get to weeding using a plastic razor blade, and we are good to go. So hopefully that helped you get an understanding of how to make a one-use jig, as well as how to make a reusable jig and how to get them aligned without needing to use the camera. Actually finished our project. I want to show you how to actually upload additional artwork. So let's go back to our interface for some final tips and tricks to getting this jig method to really work for you. So I'm coming back to my artwork, and you can see I have it positioned. I have my designs. I want to upload a new set of designs, but I don't want to have to move my jig. So let's say that I have these 3 pieces, but I have maybe 20 more. Let's go back to Illustrator. You can see I've taken the same file, it's located in the same spot, and I just put some different A's in there. So they're just a bunch of A's, nothing special. I'm going to go back and upload, and I'm going to take that new file, which I hit save as and gave it a new title. Click OK, and you'll watch, because I set that 20 by 12 artboard, it's going to drop in at exactly the same location. So it's perfectly layered on top. However, we do have the problem, if you look to the left, of having 2 layers of the circle wells and 2 rectangles and then 2 like scored text pieces. So instead of trying to select those and find those and get rid of those, let's go back to Illustrator, and I'm just going to delete them really quick so you can see, but normally I'd put them on another layer and just hide them. Save this as a new artwork file. Just keep that as a PDF. Go back to our interface, I'm going to hit Command Z to undo, and now I'm going to upload it with just the artwork. So just the replacement artwork. We're going to go find that file. I got so many things on here. Here we go, new artwork, upload. And you'll see it doesn't matter that we don't have the border anymore. They're still going to drop in exactly where they need to. So that makes it really simple. You just put your jig, your text, your wells on a separate layer and hide them in Illustrator, and then you can just keep uploading new artwork. So you could actually upload everything with, all pieces of artwork layered, and then you'll see them, as long as they're colored differently, as different functions within the interface. So you can do it that way. So let's actually take a look at how this compares in Illustrator. So this same little panel where we have both our X and Y position and our height and width, as well as our little diagram for how you adjust that or what anchor point you adjust to, we can do the same exact thing in Illustrator. So when we upload new artwork, it will actually come in exactly the same location, which is really kind of a neat feature here. So as this uploads, you can see, there we go. So even though it's not aligned, if we use those whole numbers to get things adjusted, we can use our positioning tool to get everything correctly aligned. So even if you uploaded a whole new one and you had moved it in the file, as long as you go look at the XY position, you can get it adjusted. So when we're back in Illustrator, we can actually adjust everything in here. So that's the move panel. That allows you to move things by specific amounts. That's not actually what we want. We want to go to our window and properties panel, and that's going to allow us to see the size and adjust everything the way we want. So we go to window, properties, and you'll see that same panel exists in this as well. So from here, we can use that little diagram to adjust how we're moving the width and the height, as well as the scale and proportion. So you see that little diagram with the little boxes on the left, you can check that. You can also adjust your proportions here by checking and unchecking constrained proportions. You can see I accidentally squashed this. It's not a huge deal. We're just demonstrating how this will upload, so it's not a big deal. But if you look, we can move our X and Y position using that top left corner, the same we did in the Glowforge. All right, let's go look at our interface one last time, and we can see that we can come back here to our ruler and match this up to what we're doing in Illustrator. And this is great if you actually happen to adjust your artwork accidentally and you need to go back and check it. You can compare between the programs. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my layers panel, and I'm going to move the actual jig parts, so the wells and the thing, to a new layer. So I created a new layer, and then I'm going to drag up the objects. When they're selected, you can just drag that little colored box up and move them to a new layer. You can then turn the layer off, put it at the bottom, and lock it, and now it's something I can turn on and off and just continue to add new layers with new artwork, making it really easy to reuse this jig and add stuff as we go. So hopefully that gives you a really good idea of how you can continue to use your reusable jigs for basically any project. I think this is a fundamental skill that's really worth learning, and I hope this video was helpful. Appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions, just pop over to the blog in the description. You can see the final product, and then you can let me know if you have any questions in the comments.